General concepts that have helped me in my 22-year career as a teacher, from the body's relationship to the musical conversation, mindfulness and how to teach our children and adult students self-awareness, and then the relationship between power and resistance. So starting from the body and the musical conversation, it's the first thing I talk about with my adult students who are really hesitant and like don't want to mess up, and man, I want to be like play guitar my whole life, but like it's so hard. I remind them immediately that they have been part of experiencing the musical conversation, but they don't know how to be part of it, right? So the language is already in their heads, they just haven't taught their hands how to do the thing yet. And that's up to us to bring them to the other side of creating the musical experience. With my young ones, age 5, 6, whatever, they have no background of the music, but they have to at some point learn how to follow the beat. Now, we're all professionally trained artists and musicians, and I bet none of you remember that pivotal point where you learned how to follow a beat, right? But we know when it's wrong. All right, so our go-to move is, of course, clapping the hands at the piano, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and all that. Sometimes we have some head nodders. If any of us who've been through wind band, my favorite thing when I taught middle school band, you go on the stage, 60 kids all tapping their foot, like, oh my God. Okay, those are all great tools, but here's another one I picked up along the way in my teaching experiences, is using your breath. And there's a side note about using our breath. So when we use our breath to count our beats, it's internal. And also, there's no limbs involved. So if you train your students at any age, dance too, right? And you're counting 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? You internalize the breath. We don't see that. And also, it's so within ourselves that we can experience time without giving any visual cues to the audience that you have no idea where you are. Okay? So how we breathe starts with a diaphragm breath. This is a side note. You can look up on your own qigong breathing or diaphragm breathing. This is when we bypass the face and the chest and putting the air directly to our belly button without using our skeleton. That's important. Because I remember 5th grade band, right, you got 70 kids in the room. How do you get 70 kids to do the same thing? You exaggerate. Problem is, by the time they get to 8th grade, they think that's what deep breathing looks and feels like. Right? The problem there, you have conflict. You're not getting enough air in your throat. You're moving your skeleton. And if you're holding a saxophone, right, it's going to ruin your embouchure and all those things are involved. So when you can control your breathing and teach this to your young ones and the older ones, even before playing the drum set, I do this with my drummers all the time. When you breathe into your solar plexus, it calms your nervous system, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, so it puts you in a state of relaxation before performance, right? Stage fright, we all faced it. Our students face it all the time. Teach them how to breathe properly into the middle of the bodies. And then when the air comes out, it first starts with the visual and audio cue. And of course, we have to exaggerate a little bit so they know they're doing it right. After a while, it just becomes an internal experience for them. I still do this. When I was in drum corps line, drum line, boom, right? It has to start from within us. And at some point, not all students know how to do this, so it's our jobs to teach them how to do that. Once they have mastered how to follow the tempo, it is important for all of us, in dance and in music, to teach our bodies how to experience the musical phrase. Again, at one point, did any of us remember how to feel a 4-measure phrase? It just kind of happened, right? 8-measure phrase, it just kind of happens. But what if you have a student that has no idea where they are in the song? Okay? I do this a lot with my drummers, okay? When they are learning the pattern, I bring up neuroscience, the basal ganglia. Okay? That is the part of the brain that automates motor neuro motions like breathing and blinking. And I make this joke all the time. Imagine you can't get very far in life if you have to remember when to breathe. It comes automatic, okay? So when they've got that down, we start learning how to count in groups of 4, because 4-4 is like, the universal, everything starts with 4-4. So we start doing exercises in 4 measures, and I tell them to stop, okay? They're playing their groove. We get through those 4 measures, and I'll make sure they stop without me giving any visual cue that you should stop now. Let them figure it out. Oh, I just played 4 measures. Then we do an 8-measure phrase. Now, every kid's different, and I picked this up from one of my 8-year-olds. So when I was in wind band, right, we learned how to count empty measures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Ethan, remember his name, little blonde kid. Mr. Casey, I do this. 1, 2, 3. Amazing. Still use it 8 years later, right? Because he's internalizing the beat and he's keeping track of where he is in the phrase. And we all know as performers, you have to carry through your performance, right? You do the wrong words, your plie, whatever, isn't the right angle. You don't stop and fix your mistake. You have to make it through the rest of the phrase so that you can complete the artistic expression, right? There's a handful of times, I don't really remember them, I'm on Bourbon Street at a bar singing through Wonderwall, and I messed up the words to Wonderwall, right? You have to carry through the phrase. But this starts with teaching our students how to carry through by teaching them how to feel the 4 and 8 measure phrase. This is very, very, very useful, especially for, again, rhythm instruments, drums, bass, because you're in charge of the tempo. And if you're just like not paying attention to things, right, you can't really be part of the musical conversation. So, second point, mindfulness. Okay, how we teach mindfulness in music or dance lessons, right? That's knowing what decisions we make in order to get better at the thing. There's 3 points that I've been using now. The first is the power of the word yet, okay? We all have students who complain, I can't play this music, I don't know how to do. I always interrupt my kid. Yet, you can't play this yet. What's great and powerful about the word yet is that your brain hears this, and then you've opened up a whole other reality that you haven't seen yet, that is going to happen. Because we all do this. I'm not a morning person, I hate to work out. When your brain hears you say these limited sort of beliefs, then it believes it as true, and it'll fulfill that every time that you keep telling yourself, I'm not a morning person. Cool. Subconsciously, you're never gonna be a morning person. Congratulations, right? I teach this to like an 8-year-old, okay? One of my favorite students, well, you don't have favorite students, but I have a favorite student. She graduated last year. I taught her for 7 years. Became the principal clarinetist of the New Orleans Youth Symphony 3 years in a row, right? And she would just, I wouldn't have to interrupt her anymore. There'd be a part in the music, blah, 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 and she's like, oh, I can't play it yet. Yes, right? Because when you take on these kids in middle school, 7th, 8th grade, like their hormones and bodies are changing, they're so unsure of everything, and I can't do this. I have a middle schooler now, in the year that I've had him since last June, he knows the power of yet. I will not let him say don't. We always say, I can't do this yet. Okay? Now, when we as teachers tell our kids, go home and practice. Oh, you didn't practice enough. How many of us are actually teaching our students how to practice? Because we all know the old saying, practice makes perfect. That is wrong. Practice makes permanent. Again, around my kids as young as 6, as old as 60. The brain does not learn through downloading. The brain learns through repetition. And if you are doing something incorrectly over and over and over, it is now permanent. So being mindful of how we practice, I use a metaphor of the bucket. The practice bucket. I don't know who I stole this from. You can steal it from me. Every time we practice something, we have to mindfully look for, how am I going to make this better? And when we fill our bucket with, figurative marbles, sand, whatever, Legos, there are holes in the bucket. That means if you want a lot of stuff in the bucket, you have to keep filling it. Because the other part of practice is performance. That's when you take that bucket and you chuck it out into the air. Okay? Letting go. Whatever's in that bucket, we're good to go. I see this mostly in that season getting ready for recitals, right? Like they know the song, but they didn't quite fill the bucket. And I'll literally say, the ones who've been with me for a while, did you fill the bucket this week? No. And I don't show anger. I don't show disappointment. It's like, well, you should have filled the bucket this time. Because the witness themselves, oh, I didn't do the work. Mindfulness, accountability, right? If you don't do the thing, then you're not going to be prepared for the performance. It's all about filling the bucket. So that's the other part of practice, is performance. How are we guiding our students through the mental part of getting through, it's not just stage fright, but the execution of the things that we are teaching our bodies, right? It's not just the instrument. Your body remembers how to do this. And whatever you put into the memory of learning something, your body remembers everything. Not just the motor motion of your hands, but your attitude towards it. I remember being in music school, and there's this one part that's like, all like sextuplets at like, whatever, 90 beats per minute. I hated that piece. Hate the Poulenc Sonata. But like, because I assigned so much bad emotion to those two measures, every time I got there, I'd feel it, because I taught my body all the details of being angry and anxious about that little piece there. I filled my bucket with anger. I'm sure we have, you're probably thinking, oh, I have a student that's angry all the time because he can't do something. So that's a mental health issue. That's a whole other talk. But know that it is up to us to be sensitive to knowing and watching our students. Where are they fighting? Where are they not knowing how to fill the bucket, again, with positive emotions and the right motions? And there's a word and phrase that I don't know who I stole this from. I use the words, teach it to your hands. Instead of go fix it. Teach it to your hands. So by saying that to someone and really embodying the words of teach it to your hands, you're separating yourself from the motor functions of your limbs, or whatever you're doing, please, right? To just command them to move beyond your emotion about it. You're teaching it to your hands. So when, again, I have a student that can't play the Afro-Cuban beat with foots on 2 and 4 and hands in 6, whatever, we slow it down to control it with a good emotion, and then we teach it to our hands. And when you do that enough with a good attitude and repetition, they've filled the bucket. So let's move on to the other side of the bucket. In performance, right, whatever's in that bucket, don't attach yourself to it. Throw it out, it's done. So my favorite things to do getting ready for recital season is I have them go in the corner. We pretend we're off stage, right? It's dark and If they've been through it before, they know it's up. If they've never been through it before, we're at least teaching their bodies to go through that, like, oh, I'm getting ready to performance. Again, this is a whole central nervous system reset thing. Have them do the diaphragm breath. Put your air in your belly. And then we literally shake it out. Spin around. Go. Right, so in that fueled, like, it's not really adrenaline, but they're recreating that when they go on stage. So we do this in the safety of our studio, where we're just kind of moving, and you're excited, I took this big breath and I just moved. And they sit down, I'm like, see you at the end, buddy, go. And then while they're in that execution mode, I remind them not to judge. Don't try to look for the mistakes. Just get to the end. We'll talk about it later, right? Do that for like 4 weeks straight. At the end of every lesson, we're still teaching things and going to the theory book, but we always start or end the lesson with a recital piece, but we get into that mode to throw the bucket so that we get the other side. It's not a new experience for them to go on stage, because I've taught their bodies how to deal with, oh, I take a deep breath in, and I'm there backstage with them. Breathe down. Cool. I'll see you at the end. So there's nothing new about that experience. We've already prepped the mind and the body to go through that motion. And it's much more successful than me sitting there on my phone in the dark at Fairmount Auditorium. Oh, that's my kid. Right? It's our role to take them through and over that threshold. And then the ones who make it to high school, yeah, I'll cheer for them up and off stage. But like for the young ones who've never been through that, I'm there, right? Because our body and mind's more through mimicry. If it's a new experience they've never done, I'm going to breathe with them. Get down to their level, breathe into your belly, out, here we go, see you at the end. Go. Last part about mindfulness. I made my own metaphor for this. Don't think of a green monkey making sushi on a cruise ship. You might have heard the pink elephant example. Don't think of a pink elephant. I chose to use green monkeys. The brain does not speak English. The brain speaks in montages. There is no visual montage for the word don't. There is a visual montage for green monkeys making sushi on a cruise ship, right? It's there, I gotcha. All right, so when we are in an interactive situation with our students, the kind of language that we use is very important, because if we use negatives, those negatives are gonna roll right past them, and they're gonna do the thing that you don't want them to do. This is something that I did myself when I was in music school and figuring out, like, don't squeeze her hand so hard. Don't do that with her face. Relax her face. hold your hand like this. Same in posture for Pilates and things like that. Hold your leg out, blah, 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 blah. Use this muscle, not that one. To find your center. Active, positive language, especially when correct. Because the way that we talk to our students is the way that our students will talk to themselves. The way that we talk to our students is the way that they talk to themselves. That's also a parenting thing. That's another TED Talk. Anyway, recap, mindfulness, the power of yet. Teach it to your hands. You can use a bucket analogy, whatever. You can steal it from me. And then positive action language. You can't use the word don't. I just double negative there, but you know what I mean. Avoid the word don't. Positive action language. If there's a goal, a technical goal, try to find and reword, oh, don't stand like that. It's stand firmer. Don't stick your butt out when you plie. Hold your center, right? Oh no, my teacher got me all the time for my butt out and plie. It's fine. All right, last part was power versus resistance. Okay, this is my definition I came up with. Power is our intended action experienced internally. Resistance is what we experience externally in two ways. Resistance can be a teachable and useful tool, or resistance is how am I getting in my own way, or what is holding me back. So primarily I'm a clarinetist. Okay, we deal with a lot of resistance. And a long-going thing that I tell my intermediate clarinetists is, we'll make it pretty later. We'll make it pretty later. And that goes for a lot of things with, especially in things involving the muscles. Okay, this is very true with dancers. Our muscles and our neuro whatever system can't just change in 20 minutes. It takes weeks, okay? So we have to encourage our students to know that, like, well, that's where it is today, right? They say that in yoga. That's where it is today, and have the patience to let them figure that out and come to a place of peace that there's something they can't do yet because their body hasn't learned how to do it. I mean, physiologically, right? We need new neurons to make connections to how to do the thing, as well as the muscle fibers to learn how to do the thing. And that will not happen immediately. It happens over conditioning or as a series of weeks. So my favorite things to do with my piano students who are starting out, we learn how to clap with our fingers. All right, just the 5 finger. Right, just the 3 finger. Just the 1 finger. We don't even use the piano for half of my beginner piano lessons because I'm teaching their bodies first. So when they interact with the piano, they've already learned, right, how to use fine motor control, and it's just making noise. Do I correct them with the wrong note? Absolutely not. I let them be part of the musical conversation. I'll play my guitar. And they're learning whole notes to feel. All right, use your 1 finger, find a C. All right, find a bunch of Cs. I don't even have the bench in the room, right? Put it off to the side and let them jump around and experience, right, the piano purely from their internal experience. Cool? All right, another thing about power and resistance, again, side note, source, this is my sort of take on Alexander technique. I don't know if any of you have ever encountered Alexander technique. I'm not officially certified to teach or have taken full courses. It's my flute teacher did some Alexander technique things with me. So I'm just gonna, this is a generalization, introduction, express bite of Alexander technique. Basically, it's turn off the muscles you don't need, focus on the muscles you do need, okay? Especially for instruments that you have to suspend in the air. When I first held up a flute, I was already so used to carrying the weight of a clarinet, so like, my body was kind of crunched, there's all this extra tension all through my legs, but we would work through a golf swing, right? The golf swing confuses the musculature, because like, oh wait, these arms have to have this job, but the rest of the body has something else to do, right? Same for guitar playing. How many times are guitarists, if they're standing and they're fighting their instrument, it's basically a relationship with gravity, all right? That probably applies to all of us, even if you teach piano. Watch your student. What is their relationship with gravity? Because if they're fighting gravity on top of trying to learn the instrument, oh yeah, that tension is going to be learned in their bodies. Whatever song they play, their body's going to remember those conditions and recreate them every time unless someone came along and fixed it for them. I'm very, very passionate about the subject, having dealt with carpal tunnel syndrome for like 2 decades now. So here's a fun little thing about the hands that has changed my life. You can always put your hands up. I can only hold one, but check this out. Shake it out. I want you to all make a fist like you're squeezing an imaginary rock. Okay? Now take a look at the space right underneath the wrist. When you lock your hands, that is a tendon. That is the carpal tunnel. All of the tendons are literally locked, so nothing else can happen in that hand. Okay? Check it out. Thinking about being musicians, when you have an instrument in your hand, is that a useful muscle group to use? Oh God, no. Right? There's no mobility. There's no finesse in holding something. So in my lessons, I call that your primal muscle, right? Your grabby-grabby. I don't have scientific words. I'm sure I could have looked it up, but whatever. Grabby-grabby. The opposite of that, and the more finesse can be found in the other group of muscle groups. I think I did look it up. I didn't write it down. So take the same hands. I do this with my students so they experience learning how to move their fingers in a fine way. Imagine that pinky. It's going to aim for the base of your thumb, and we roll it like this. And the end shape is not a fist. Your thumb is gently resting on the side of the knuckle over here. Now take a look at that space underneath your wrist. No movement. Changed my life. Okay? And when I can catch my kids grabbing their guitars, right, with their front hand, I can't change my chords because they're opening and closing. Catch it early. Not when you're 24 and have to like drop out of grad school because everything hurts. I mean, that's an extreme case, but that's literally what happened. Anyway, fine motor skill versus holding on. Okay? And when we do start to work with those muscles, they're not going to be strong right away. Okay, we know this on guitar. We have to get calluses first so we get good tone on a middle string. But it's something that we work with telling someone 1 to 10. 10 being the absolute strongest that you can have, and 1, the least amount. And everyone's going to be different how they experience 1 through 10. With an embouchure and air pressure, right? With your singers, you're going to use your diaphragm muscle. Imagine what 1 feels like, and what 10 feels like, right? You're going to find that in between and meet them where they're at, because you know, especially the vocal students, right, age 10, 11, whatever, they're trying to copy their heroes, and they're going to hurt themselves, okay? They're going to hurt themselves. So they have to, again, Alexander technique, but a la KC, find the muscles you need and the muscles you don't need. Shut them off, find your gravity, right, let everything work on its own and find its way over time with repetition, because the brain learns through repetition, not downloading. Okay, so that's power versus tension. Cool? All right, so I hope something of this sparked some interest and some curiosity in other subject matters. I'm happy to talk at them at length, because I have lots of experience with my hand problems and neuroscience. So enjoy the rest of the day. If you have any questions, come find me afterwards.